friends! Today I'm going to be talking about the top books that are on my TBR for 2023. Now, the past few years when I've done this and I've made my list of like the top books that I want to read, there's been a fundamental problem with the way that I'm making these lists, and it's that I put too many books on them. And what happens is when I have like 20, 21, 22 books, I always end up reading only half of the list, because the first couple months of the year, those are the books that I'm picking from. Those are the books that I'm the most excited for, and I'll read like 10 of them. But by the time we hit like summer, there's new books that I want to read, and those original books on my list are no longer like the top priority for me. So I decided this year to cut that list in half, and I have the 10 books that I want to read the most this year. And hopefully by limiting this list a little bit, I will actually be able to complete it. I've also been a little bit more strategic in how I selected these books. So half of them are books from authors that I already love, and then the other half are new to me authors that I'm really excited to read. So hopefully this makes it easier for me to actually prioritize these books and complete the list. But let's just get into it. These are going to be the 10 books that I most want to read in 2023. First up, we are starting off with a series, but I am counting it as one book, and that is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I have already read the first book. I read this back in 2017, and it was my favorite book of that year, and I've still always upheld this as one of the best crafted books I've ever read, but I've never finished the trilogy. So this year I really want to do that and reread the 5th season, and then read The Obelisk Gate and The Stone Sky. I'm also doing a reading challenge for the whole year with my Patreon, where we are reading big and intimidating books. I put up a TBR video on my Patreon of all of those books, and this series was on that list, and I'm trying to tackle one of those intimidating books a month. So this is the one that I am probably going to be starting with, because it is kind of a priority for me. I love N.K. Jemisin, and I've always wanted to complete this trilogy. This is a fantasy, kind of sci-fi blend about this world that has had an apocalyptic event. This book is following 3 different perspectives that all sort of tie together in this like end of the world situation that they have going on. Next, we have Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, who wrote Station 11, which I loved. It was another one of my favorite books when I read that, and this one just sounds so good. I believe that this one is also post-apocalyptic, and it is about humanity who is now living on the dark side of the moon, and we're following people from 1912 to 500 years later when they have to move to the moon. And if this is anything like Station 11, I feel like it's going to be so amazing. I was just obsessed with that book, so I'm very excited to read this one as well. Next up, I had to put a T. King Fisher book on here, and I have so many of her books left on my TBR. I had a hard time picking which one I wanted to put on this list. Technically, all of her books that I haven't read are on here, but I went with Paladins Grace. This is the first book in this book 1 of the Saint of Steel, and I believe that this takes place in the same world as Swordheart, and I have been told that there is a character from Swordheart who I loved who's also in this book, so I'm very excited about that. And it's following our main character, who is a paladin, and he encounters a fugitive in an alley and witnesses an assassination attempt gone wrong, and now the pair must navigate a web of treachery while a cryptic killer stalks one step behind. I believe that this has romance in it too, so I'm very, very excited to read that. Swordheart was my favorite book of 2022, so I'm hoping that the more that I read books in this same world, I'm just going to love all of them. The next one we have is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I know, I'm like one of the last people on BookTube to have read this book. This is actually my Patreon book club for January, so this is like the first book on this list that I'm probably going to be completing. I'm very excited. I sort of was putting off reading this book because the sequel was like not coming out, but now the sequel, Hellbent, has come out, so I am moving this up to the top of my TBR, and I'm very excited to be reading it with my patrons. So yeah, if you don't know what this is about, it is dark academia magic, secret societies, and I'm very excited to see how I end up feeling about it. Obviously, it is like very beloved and hyped, so I'm kind of nervous to read it, but I'm still very excited. And then the last one I have on this list of authors that I've already read from before is These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Alice Marshall. Kate Alice Marshall wrote 2 of my favorite YA horror books, and this is her book that came out last year, and I have been dying to read it. It's basically like a haunted house horror, and I just have loved everything that I've read from Kate Alice Marshall, so I am so excited to get to this one. She has never let me down. Oh, actually, I was wrong. I have one more from an author that I've read from before, and that is Daphne by Josh Malerman. Now, unlike all of the other authors that I've mentioned who I've loved books from before, Josh Malerman is kind of a mixed author for me. I have given his books 5 stars, 2 stars, DNF. Like, I'm all over the board with his books, so I'm very curious to see what I end up thinking of this. But this one's a horror book about this ghost story about Daphne, and she's a girl who died under mysterious circumstances, and I'm pretty sure it's like one of those ghost stories, kind of like Bloody Mary, where like if you say Daphne or if you think about her, then supposedly she appears and kills you. It sounds very interesting, and I've actually been hearing really great things about this, so I am very excited to read it. This was one of the horror books that I wanted to get to last year, and I just didn't end up getting to it. All right, now for some new to me authors that I'm very excited to read. The first one we have is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is about a cannibalistic serial killer. I've been told by so many people that I'm going to love this because of how much I love these sort of weird lit fic books, and that also, hello, the main character is a serial killer and a cannibal, so I'm very excited to read that finally. The next one is No Gods for Drowning by Hailey Piper. I have a few Hailey Piper books on my TBR, but this one just sounds super good and unique. This is about a world where the gods have now fled, and the monsters that they have kept at bay are now threatening to come down and kill all the people in this town. And now there's a serial killer who's begun ritually sacrificing victims in order to summon her mother, a blood god, in the hopes of preventing these monsters from attacking. It sounds super interesting. It's a fantasy horror with monsters and gods and like ritual sacrifices, and all of that sounds like things that I love. The next one is We Spread by Ian Reid. This is a book that I've just been seeing everyone talking about. I genuinely do not know what it's about, and I kind of don't want to know. This is like one of those books that like I don't really want to know what the synopsis is, what the plot is. I know that Ian Reid is known for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which was like a very popular book a few years back. I never read that. Something about it just never really interested me, but this one is just very intriguing to me. So I'm gonna go into this one kind of blind, but I'm excited to read this. And then the last book that I have on here that I want to read in 2023 is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This is a Regency fantasy book about fae that just sounds so good. All the blurbs and everything just says that it's cozy and whimsical and romantic, and like all of that just sounds totally up my alley and amazing, and I feel like this could fit into that little genre of cozy fantasy that I have become obsessed with, especially if this has a good romance in it. So those are the 10 books that I most want to read in 2023, and like I said, hopefully because I've made this a smaller list, I will actually be able to prioritize these books and read all of them before the end of the year. So let me know in the comments what book you most want to read this year. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!